Thank you very much, Helen, and yeah, thank you very much. So yeah, good afternoon, everyone. It's really a pleasure to be, I guess, taking the reins this afternoon. We've certainly got a lot of things that we want to talk to you about today. So our afternoon today is focused on value from Queensland's mine waste, and so we've been working now with Helen, I guess, since the end of 2019. Sort of on this project, we've been going around the state, and I know that you've heard from us in various formats, such as at Digging Deeper and other forums, but now we've got an opportunity to sort of spend a bit more time explaining not just the work we've been doing in terms of going to sites, and sort of sites such as this that you're looking at here, which is Pindora, but also some of the things that we've been doing in terms of thinking about future mine waste materials and how we can address the characterisation of those up front, so we actually design our mines to actually recover this potential value rather than it ending up in piles like this. So there's a lot of exciting stuff to get through this afternoon, so I'm just going to get stuck right in. So I don't know about many of you in the audience here, but I certainly love it when it comes to that time of year, sort of end of September. It's one of my son's birthdays, but that's not what I'm interested in. It's this. Now, this comes out end of September, and it really is that snapshot of the main risks that we have in the mining industry. And so it's a big questionnaire that goes out to many sort of business and executives in the mining sector. And obviously, it's that sort of opportunity to figure out what the main problems are. And actually this year, for 2022, environment and social was the #1 risk. And I suppose in previous years and the past 2 years before that, it had been licensed to operate. But certainly we can see that, the main risks in mining really do revolve around mine waste and sort of environment and social, management and behaviours around the mining industry, which goes to show the increasing pressure that we're all facing in terms of managing our mine waste. Because to me and to our team, mine waste management is certainly key to kind of this environment and social challenge that we have as we move forward. But certainly mine waste is this really interesting thing because it actually plays a massive role in many of these other kind of risks that we have. I mean, thinking about decarbonisation, for example, there's that opportunity to look at mine waste as a potential resource to extract, things like cobalt, more copper, more nickel, to actually, help build those new technologies. It can also be used to actually absorb some of the CO2 from the atmosphere through CO2 sequestration. So mine waste really has a massive role to play in a lot of these risks. And I hope in the next 2.5 hours or 3 hours, we can certainly start to explore some of those potential opportunities. And when we think about Australia and we think about where we could actually go sampling, well, there's so many places. And, I love putting this photo in because to me, it really sort of speaks to the diversity of sites that we really have at our fingertips to actually go and explore. I imagine that many people on the webinar this afternoon are probably geoscientists or metallurgists. And so, you probably, like myself, love going out into the field and looking at new environments. And there's nothing more boring than going to a site which kind of looks the same as the last site, as the one before, etc. It's not like that with mine waste at all. There's different types, there's different climates, there's different mineralogical problems in terms of the generation of acid and metalliferous drainage, or maybe you're trying to manage, dust generating from arsenic-rich tailings. And there's just so many sites across Australia where there's this potential opportunity where we can apply kind of principles of economic rehabilitation. So this is a map that was produced by Tim Werner in 2020. I think he was down at the Melbourne University at the time. But, certainly he trawled through the state geological surveys and he pulled out information on the number of active and inactive mine sites. And that includes kind of quarries too, which probably sort of skews the blobs a little bit there. But certainly what we can see is there's just so many opportunities across Australia. And so that's what myself and my team are looking to get stuck into in the next little while. And so I kind of mentioned that these mine waste materials could potentially contain these things, critical metals. And, you've got to be living under a rock if you don't know what a critical metal is. And certainly in Queensland, we call them new economy minerals because we're thinking a bit more broadly in terms of all of those things that we do need to drive, this transition towards our new economy and our low carbon future. But, if we look at Geoscience Australia's prospectus, we can certainly see that, these are the key elements or metals that they're sort of considering to be critical. But, for someone who works in mine waste, myself and my team, we recognise these things as the things that actually are the most concentrated in some of our sites in the waste materials. So we can actually see there's that potential value in our waste. I mean, I remember being a much younger student, sort of earning my PhD, we go on the laser ablation instrument, or we'd be looking at things on the automated mineralogy instrument. We'd see things like xenotime and yttrium, and we'd sort of think, that's not interesting, we're just interested in gold or other precious metals, etc. But now, we go back to those thoughts that we had there around sort of identifying things like that using those instruments. And there's this massive opportunity to go back and even just harvest the existing data to find that additional value. And that's part of what we've been doing in the NEMI project with Helen and her team too. And if we think about that drive towards the low carbon economy, you know, I absolutely adore the visual capitalist graphics. They just capture everything so beautifully. And this is this really sort of speaks to anybody who says we don't need mining and, you know, mining's bad for the future. Absolutely incorrect. It's absolutely fundamental for the future, because we can see that if we're going to seriously make this transition towards a low carbon future, we're going to need all of these metals. And, you know, I'm just highlighting a few here. I mean, obviously, in a state like Queensland, you know, copper is important to us, and there's certainly a lot of copper left in our waste, which we will touch on a little bit later on. But other things like cobalt and indium and nickel, again, they're very much concentrated in the waste, and we're only, you know, starting to scratch the surface in terms of undertaking that exploration and finding those critical new resources. Certainly, we're not proposing that waste is going to be the primary source of these metals, but we certainly see there's an opportunity for that waste to supplement our, you know, our increasing demands for these metals. So for me and for my team, it's a very exciting time to be working in this space. And when we think about, you know, is this just something that's happening in Australia, or is this sort of a global phenomenon? Well, certainly there's a lot of interest around the international community in terms of valorization of waste, and particularly with that focus on critical or new economy metals and minerals. And so I just wanted to highlight some of them. So, you know, over in Finland, you know, there's been a big drive towards, you know, growing the battery metal sector, you know, out of Sweden and Finland in particular. And this is just one example here of a paper recently published by Parbhakar-Fox. And they were obviously looking at the Haveri tailings. And there they were sort of very much focused on looking at cobalt, copper and gold and recovery of, or definition of those in the tailings. But I guess one of the challenges that we have as we've been going through this project is, you know, how do you take samples and actually, you know, estimate the value across that TSF? And I suppose Parvinen's paper was certainly one that sort of showed how you could sort of introduce some of those tools, you know, kriging and so forth, to actually undertake that sort of modelling across a tailing storage facility. So even if you feel like you're data poor and you don't have enough, you know, samples or data points to actually undertake some modelling, it's absolutely not true. So in fact, you know, just having a look at the data that you've got existing could be good enough just to do that pre-analysis before you actually do something a bit more serious at your site to define your resource. You know, another waste stream that we don't commonly talk about, but it's actually the acid mine drainage itself. So, you know, there was a study that came out of, I guess it was Spain. They were looking at sort of drainage from the Iberian Pyrite Belt, so a lot of the VMS deposits there. If you ever get the chance to go to the actual Rio Tinto River, I absolutely recommend it. But, you know, what they were doing here was they were actually measuring the rare earth element content already in solution in that acid mine drainage as a way to actually, you know, improve the health of this riverine community by pulling out the metals. And certainly within the NEMI project, that's not something we've so much focused on, but it certainly is a good opportunity to undertake, you know, within Queensland and beyond. I mean, think about Mount Lyell down in Tasmania, for example. That's the prime place where you could actually undertake some copper recovery and clean up the river down there. Looking at other critical metals such as tungsten, there was a thesis that came out of Luleå by Jane Mulinchi. And, you know, again, it was very much looking at sort of, you know, developing a geomet approach towards characterization of these tailings in her site over in Sweden. And, you know, I guess just to sort of highlight some of the other research opportunities, you know, there's been many papers that have sort of looked at, you know, the Chilean mine tailings and the opportunity to grow the critical metal sector there by looking at the mine tailings as a potential resource. And Olivia Mahias isn't talking about that today, but that's certainly something that she's becoming involved in. And, you know, across looking at our Australian counterparts, like the Horizon 2020 projects, they've been successfully running for a number of years now. And I guess in many ways, they kind of have led this kind of thought towards, you know, circular economy opportunities for mine waste materials. So it's an exciting time, and we certainly see some companies also tapping into this sort of thought process. So it's not just, you know, restricted to academic journals and university pursuits. You know, there's real companies making, you know, international companies really looking at waste in a different way, which is good to see. And so if we look back towards Queensland, you know, we have many examples of that right here in Queensland too. And I'm sure everyone's heard all about New Century, so I'm not going to talk about it in any detail, but it is exciting to see, certainly for myself and for Laura Jackson, who you'll hear from later on. It's really exciting to see that Century Mine is now sort of looking at taking on the Mount Lyell site down in Tasmania. So, you know, they've obviously developed expertise in tailings reprocessing here in Queensland, and they're now looking to, like, you know, apply that expertise and that knowledge down to actually, you know, valorize one of the most contaminated sites in Australia, which I think is fantastic for them to take on that challenge. And certainly we'd be keen to get involved if there are opportunities. You're going to be hearing from Peter a bit later on, who'll be talking to you about the Mount Morgan project. So we're really excited to hear about that. So I'm not going to talk too much. Certainly in these GSQ webinars, you've heard from Mount Carbine talking about the tailings reprocessing and the waste rock reprocessing they're doing there to recover tungsten. Just last year, the Tick Hill mine, the tailings from Tick Hill was sort of taken on by BIM Metals to look at valorisation of the tailings there to recover gold. So there are real projects here in Queensland. But I guess our point is there could be a lot more. And that's the exciting opportunity that Helen and her team have given us to undertake. So if we look at what the NEMI project is kind of how it's broken up, it's got package 1 and package 2. Probably don't have time to talk about those, and you've probably heard about it before, but if you just kind of wanted some context, our project sits here under package 1, so we're the old mines new value research package. And what we're aiming to do is, we want to build real good knowledge across Queensland. We want to look at, the ore deposit types that we have in Queensland, look at, their mine tailings, and see if we can start making that relationship between the ore deposit type and what could be in the mine tailings. But we also, we're dealing with tailings, and we're also dealing with mine waste materials that are sitting on the surface of the earth. And if you can just see in the background there, this is a tailings storage facility. And this was probably in December, so, getting into summer. And you can already see all the different efflorescent minerals forming on the surface. So, if we think about recovery of things like cobalt or gallium, germanium, indium, whatever, if we think about the recovery of these new economy or critical metals, we have to think about how they actually cycle in these tailings storage facilities. So, if they're deep in the tailings and the pore water is acidic, is that going to then mean that your metals contained within the host phase are going to mobilize? And then, as it sort of heats up, are they then going to be transported through that pore water and then sort of reabsorb onto iron oxides? So we're starting to build that new knowledge through the work that Lauren Nichols, Olivia Maheus, Laura and myself are all undertaking. So it's kind of like, it's really good to build that sort of fundamental knowledge of how the ore deposit links to the metal cycling in this climatic zone. And just to sort of introduce the team in terms of the key players who've been working in this space, this isn't everyone. There's a whole chorus of people across UQ who've been sort of very much assisting us in this journey, in this project. So I just wanted to just highlight the different people in the team. So you'll be hearing from Laura Jackson today, you'll be hearing from Anne Whitworth, you'll be hearing from Lauren Nichols, and also Olivia Maheus, who's she's unfortunately based in Chile, but fortunately she looks like she's going to be coming over in January. But she's pre-recorded her talk. But certainly we're well supported by our colleagues across the JKMRC, and some other departments within the university. So it's been there's a lot going on. I'm sure if we're doing another one of these next year, you'll hear about some of the updates in those sort of more mineral processing spaces. So in terms of what the project actually involves, we've designed it so it's in 3 streams. So stream 1 is probably, if you kind of follow someone like myself and Laura on LinkedIn, we kind of make these posts about going out to sites and sort of collecting mine waste materials. And that's normally the investigations we've been undertaking in stream 1. So that's kind of our first pass investigation. We go to the site, we collect up to 80 samples, put it through a geochem program, targeted mineralogy, and we get a bit of an idea in terms of if there's actually fertility for that target new economy metal or mineral or not. And if there is sort of significant fertility and we need to do further investigations, then we go to stream 2. And so Lauren and Olivia, their research sits within stream 2. And that's where we do very detailed investigations, drill to depth, look at sort of the drill core material and start to try and relate what we're seeing in the waste to the actual ore body itself. Materials collected in both stream 1 and 2 feed into stream 3. And this is where things get really awesome, because working with our colleagues over in the JKMRC, the sort of the metallurgical sort of wing of the SMI, and also our colleagues across in the School of Earth Sciences, Chemical Engineering, Civil Engineering, we have that opportunity to develop new mineral processing techniques. And we're just sort of getting started in that space, which is great to see. So in terms of the sites that we've been to already, that's just a quick snapshot, and I'm going to talk about it a bit later, so I'm not going to dwell too much on this one. But I just wanted to leave you with kind of what our group's kind of main ethos is. So, our group is called Mine Waste Transformation through Characterisation, and our aim really is to apply geometallurgical tools to enable geoenvironmental characterisation of mine waste across the life of mine. So, we don't just, we have been focusing very much on existing waste, but, everything that we're doing is really building towards, the mining industry, making a shift towards actually proper whole in-depth characterisation of their total deposit at the start. So, if you can characterise your waste material here and actually identify that value at this point in time, then, some of the issues that we see associated with mine waste materials at the back end very much can disappear. You know, we can reduce tailings volume. We're not going to see, hopefully with it, we're less likely to see things like bromidinio happen again, but certainly reducing things like acid and metalliferous drainage production is very exciting. It's very necessary when we think about that risks in mining and environment and social being at #1. So without further ado, I think that's a good introduction into what we are doing here at the SMI in the MyWatch group. We're, I think, almost still on time, but you're going to hear from Lauren, Laura, Olivia, myself, and Peter in the next little while. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and hand over to Lauren. So thank you very much.